It begins with a train ride. Not the kind that brings you home after a long day, but the kind you board when the world outside is falling apart and inside you're trying to stitch together a sense of survival. August 6, 1945. Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a 29-year-old engineer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, was finishing a 3-month business trip in Hiroshima. He'd woken up that morning thinking only of logistics, his departure papers, train tickets, whether he'd packed everything. It was supposed to be his last day in the city. He stepped outside, briefcase in hand, walking toward the dockyards under a heavy summer sun. The morning was too still. That strange kind of silence that always seems to precede catastrophe. At exactly 8:15 a.m. he looked up. A bomber passed overhead. Just one. Odd. Usually they came in squadrons. What he saw next can't be understood, only described. A flash of pure white light. Searing, immediate, infinite. As if the sun had fallen to earth and detonated in silence. Yamaguchi was thrown from the ground as a sphere of raw energy vaporized nearly everything in a 2-kilometer radius. The air turned into fire. His eardrums ruptured. When he came to, his body was a mosaic of burns. His face blistered, his arms scorched, and yet he was alive. The atomic bomb, Little Boy, had just leveled Hiroshima. In one breath, a city of over 300,000 people was reduced to flame and ruin. Tens of thousands were killed instantly. Yamaguchi stumbled through a landscape that no longer resembled Earth. The sky glowed red. People wandered the streets like ghosts, their skin peeling from their bones, some clutching their eyeballs, others still screaming without tongues. Hell, he would later say, is not a myth. I have seen it. Despite his injuries, he managed to crawl back to the wreckage of his hotel, where his co-workers, also injured, had survived. For a night, they huddled among ruins, unsure whether they'd live until morning. But Yamaguchi had a family in Nagasaki, and something in him, some impossible force, decided he had to get home. 2 days later, wrapped in bandages and barely able to walk, Yamaguchi boarded a train. That train. The one no one should have taken. The line to Nagasaki was still operating. How, no one knows. The journey took him through the blackened countryside, past flattened villages and rivers boiling with ash. When he arrived, his wife and infant son ran to him. The relief in their faces was a temporary illusion, because fate was not done with Tsutomu Yamaguchi. August 9th, 11:02 a.m. Yamaguchi had gone to City Hall to report back to Mitsubishi, his superiors skeptical of his wild tale of Hiroshima's annihilation. He was describing the blinding light, the shockwave, when again it happened. Another flash, another sun. This time, Fat Man, the second atomic bomb, detonated over Nagasaki. Yamaguchi was mid-sentence when the shockwave ripped through the building, imploding glass, hurling debris like missiles. He was knocked to the ground, again. The room vaporized around him, and yet he lived, again. His bandages now singed, fresh burns layered over old ones. He crawled from the wreckage of a second nuclear apocalypse. This time, the destruction was different. Nagasaki, nestled in a valley, suffered a more concentrated blast. Entire neighborhoods were instantly carbonized. A cathedral full of worshippers was obliterated in a blink. Yamaguchi ran home, afraid he would find nothing but ash where his family had once been. But miraculously, his wife and child had survived. His wife had gone out for food that morning, carrying their baby to a nearby tunnel when she saw the flash, just seconds before the explosion. 2 cities, 2 bombs, 3 days apart, and one man who survived them both. But the story doesn't end there. In the days that followed, Yamaguchi's body began to betray him. Radiation sickness set in. His hair fell out in clumps. He vomited uncontrollably. His wounds festered. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his skin unable to heal. For weeks, it was unclear if he would live. Doctors, overwhelmed by the scale of destruction, could do little but ration morphine and pray. When he finally recovered, what he returned to was not peace, but silence. The war had ended. Japan had surrendered, but survivors were not hailed as heroes. They were labeled hibakusha, explosion-affected people. Seen as cursed, many faced discrimination. Employers refused to hire them. Families avoided them. No one wanted a reminder of what had happened. For years, Yamaguchi said nothing. He raised his son, tried to rebuild a normal life, and buried the trauma beneath the routine of survival. But time doesn't forget, and pain doesn't vanish. It only transforms. Decades later, as he watched the world build newer, deadlier weapons, he could no longer remain silent. He began to speak, first in interviews, then in international conferences. He became a rare voice, not of bitterness, but of warning, a living paradox, someone whose existence proved both the horror and absurdity of nuclear war. He told his story not with rage, but with clarity. He recounted how he'd watched human skin melt like wax, how cities became cinders in seconds, how radiation poisoned not just the flesh, but memory itself. His message was not revenge, but remembrance. He testified before the United Nations, urging leaders to abandon nuclear arms, not from ideology, but from first-hand experience. In 2009, 64 years after the bombs fell, the Japanese government officially recognized him as a Niju Hibakusha, a double bomb survivor. He was the only person ever certified by both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The irony wasn't lost on him. "I could have died on either day," he once said, "but I didn't, so now I speak." He died the following year, at the age of 93, after a long battle with stomach cancer, believed by many to be caused by radiation exposure. But even in death, his story endures, not as a statistic, not as a headline, but as a whisper from the edge of history, a reminder that there was once a man who survived the unimaginable twice and chose not to forget. His name was Tsutomu Yamaguchi.